see. Okay, I think we are live.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, we are. Okay, welcome everybody to our weekly Tuesday afternoon live stream. This week, I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and with me, as always, is Angie Atkinson. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Oh, happy to have you. Some wild times that we are living in every week. It's amazing how quickly the world changes.
My gosh. Yes.
Yes. And I guess let me back up a little bit. For those of you that are new here, this is a live stream that Angie and I try to do every Tuesday around 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We alternate channels. So next week we'll be over on her YouTube channel, which is Angie Atkinson. So if you're interested in these live streams, subscribe to both of us so you make sure to get the alerts. And we go for about an hour-ish.
Yep.
So
Right on.
yeah. Yeah. So, yes, the world is rapidly changing. And um, I guess let's talk a little bit about anxiety and depression and self care, especially during this time.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are, I mean, I would say not just survivors, but people in general are stuck. We're all stuck in our houses. We have too much time to think. That's never good. I think there's a lot of depression happening. I've even seen it like in my 16-year-old son. He's kind of like, what am I supposed to do? I've cleaned my room. I've done all these things. I'm doing all my schoolwork and I'm bored. And, they can't go anywhere. But I think a lot of people are in the same boat. And I think, like you mentioned before we started, self care is a really important thing always, but especially right now for everyone. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and I guess I also just kind of wanted to mention, I think this is something that everybody is struggling with to some degree, to just kind of underline what you were just saying
Mhm.
is anxiety. I don't normally struggle with anxiety. And the other day I had to go to the grocery store and I was so anxious about it. And I really struggled with it. Felt like I was taking my life into my hands. Like it was a 50-50 chance kind of
Yeah.
a thing, or an 80-20 chance. It was really a terrible anxiety inducing feeling. And that just stayed with me the rest of the day,
Yep.
even though I'm diligent about washing down groceries, washing my hands, not touching my face, stripping down as soon as I walk in the door and putting my clothes in the laundry, all
Mhm.
of that. So I think it's interesting, um, because this is going to continue, and I think this anxiety is going to continue to grow, especially as people get laid off. Um, the stakes keep going up, right? Bills start piling up. The
Mhm.
world just really starts changing from what we know, and we only have control over what we have control over.
Right.
And it's difficult to just be like, okay, well then, we only have control over what we have control over, and then just let the rest go. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
It puts you in a hard spot. I know I've been I mentioned before we started, I've been putting off a grocery store trip for a few days now. I mean, we have enough food in the house, but there are things that you run out of, and um, because of that reason. And this morning, I had to drop off kittens at the vet to have neutering handled, and I was anxious just going there. And I mean, they even had a big giant thing of hand sanitizer, which I took advantage of, but I still felt like, oh my gosh, I had to touch the door. And so that all the way home, I'm trying not to touch anything. Not, and of course, my nose started to itch, and I thought, oh my gosh, if I scratch my nose, I might, make
Mhm.
myself sick. We heard recently that there's a case in our county now that's confirmed, and that's scary. So, yeah, going out it feels like it's risking your life right now, and that's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot. Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that we can do. I'm in Michigan, as most of you guys know, and we're, I think, number 4, like the fourth
Oh,
worst state.
hmm.
Um, and there are just certain precautions that we can all be taking, especially if you guys are not in hard hit states yet. Um, some of the recommendations are, this is the time to eat warm food.
Hmm.
So the virus has a hard time living beyond a certain temperature. I forget what it is. I want to say it's like 158 8 degrees. So, um, you know,
I
cooking.
I
Uh-huh.
saw something, I didn't mean to interrupt. I saw something today about they must have been talking about Celsius. It said 26 or 27 degrees. And I don't know how accurate that is, but I saw that today. And I thought that was in regard to the again, don't quote me on that. I read it or saw it in a little video somebody sent me. It's probably false. 158 sounds more
Well,
real.
it was probably Celsius.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
So, putting food in the microwave, baking things in the oven, cooking them on the stove, this is a good time for that. Uh, but, also, so there's like the physical things that we can do,
Hmm.
eating warmer food, doing the social distancing, um, washing your hands. I don't know if I was talking about this last time. I saw a cute meme on Facebook. Somebody had said, wash your hands like you just finished cutting jalapenos and have to take out your contacts.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. One of
Uh,
my clients, one of my clients has a child in college, and sent me a picture of a sign they had up at school before they closed down, I guess, and it said, "Wash your hands like you were cutting jalapenos and preparing to do another activity that people do in private sometimes." But
oh,
that's the name. I
Uh,
thought that was hilarious. Anyway, go on.
yeah, I thought that was the best description of like vigorous hand washing
Yes.
I've ever heard. And so little things like that, and they're big things, right? So these are the physical things we can do, but emotional and mental things that we can do. And I was having a really rough night last night with anxiety, and it's hard to turn off the news. And um, I love Reddit. I love that website. So I'm always on Reddit and I'm reading up on everything, and it can feel so important because the news is changing every hour.
Hmm.
And so creates this sense of urgency of, I've got to stay connected. I've got to keep reading this. And um, but there's that balance of, okay, well, what else do you really need to know about this? And what else can you do? Just finding out that um, cases have gone up, or that things are better or worse. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change what you're doing day in and day out if we're taking
Right.
all the precautions we should be taking. And um, it's scary. There's Splash says, well, what do I do with a stubborn wife who insists on flying? I says she's careless and thinks she's invincible.
Quarantine yourself. I mean, that's a funny thing to say, but I mean, it's dangerous. I'm surprised that they're even allowing her to fly, to be honest. I don't know
Yeah.
what her reason would be. Um, what do you think, Dana? I mean, what can you do? I mean,
Um, and it's so frustrating that domestic flights, or even that any flights anywhere, are still going.
yeah.
We know it's reckless at this point. And um, you know, all you can do is all you can do. So I would make it very clear to her that if she's planning on flying, um, that when she comes back, that she needs to go quarantine herself for 14 days.
Yeah.
If you are even going to let her back. There was a post on Reddit about this, where this college kid, came back from spring break. He'd flown to wherever, was partying, comes back home, and his dad wouldn't let him in. And his dad had said, well, the kid also, in all fairness, the kid had his own apartment, but
Okay.
I think he was just wanting to come stay at his parents, because they have food, and it's a college
Right.
kid. And the dad said, no, absolutely not. Grandma's here and you're not putting us at risk. Here's some groceries and $300, and you need to go to your apartment, and that's
I,
it.
I mean, I get it. You know, it's not like of course you'd like to have your kids stay with you, but if the kid went on spring break or even just came in from school, you would still, yeah, of course, you wouldn't want to have them. I mean,
Yeah,
in college where they hadn't been living in your house already, it
right.
makes sense, especially if they had another place to go. Mindy says,
Right.
I thought this was a live chat about narcissists.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, I guess, everything
Yeah, we're
here.
all going through it. Yeah.
Uh,
Um, yeah. But the thing is, when you are stuck, with a narcissist, I think it makes it 1,000 times worse than it would normally be. I've heard a lot of fear in the in the news, and a lot of celebrities have even spoken on, like, for domestic violence, and even though we don't always experience physical violence with narcissists, just the emotional abuse is enough to make it miserable and make you not want to. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, um
Yeah, and that's, I guess, yeah, to tie it back into what we normally talk about, you know, there's a lot of really concerning numbers coming out about the rise in domestic violence,
mhm,
the rise in child abuse, uh, you know, things kind of going on in the world. And so I think this is a time, just like Splash was saying, gosh, I have uh, this person, and my wife or other people are like, I have this person in my family who's not listening,
yeah,
and or who is just going rogue. Like, they're just not following any of these rules. They think they're just narcissistic. And
right,
what do I do? And this is the time, kind of trial by fire with boundaries of, we've got to really implement them. And it's, people are going to get upset. People that don't take this seriously are going to get upset. And
yeah,
we're going to have to learn how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, with
yeah.
setting boundaries and just saying, well, I'm sorry if you think I'm hypervigilant. I'm sorry, like, whatever. That's on you. Uh, this
I mean,
is,
yeah, yeah. I don't know how anybody can underreact to this, but I know narcissists are doing it.
yes.
And maybe it has to do with their feeling of invincibility or whatever. But, or as Shayu says, narcissists who use this as an opportunity to get supply. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point to bring up. I've heard that there's a lot of phishing scams going
Yes.
on right now during all of this, which is
Infuriating.
infuriating and like beyond the lowest of the low. Like, what kind of person, seriously?
Hmm.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
so anyways, just be careful
Yeah.
out there. Be
Yeah.
careful online. I was reading earlier today, one of the common scams right now, because
Hmm.
it's the easiest and it's the quickest, is people are lonely. They're at home,
Yeah.
and somebody might contact you through social media saying, acting like they're interested in you, and uh, even maybe showing you, sending you sexy pictures,
Yeah.
right? So like, oh, okay, I'm going to show you, here's a picture of my breasts or what have you. And as soon as you reciprocate, then they use that as blackmail.
Yep. I know someone that happened to. And that was, I mean, it was a few years back, but I know someone who did that accidentally. Well, they thought, they didn't know what this person was. And
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
I had a friend of mine, this happened to her, but it was in real life. It
Hmm.
was a guy she'd met at a club, and um, they kind of hit it off, but then the more she began chatting with him, things of course went really fast. And the more she began chatting, she's like, this guy is like, abusive and not what I'm into. And then he began threatening to blackmail her with pictures that she'd sent him. So this happens online and offline, to married people, single people, you name it. If somebody comes out of the blue, starts messaging you, even if you're lonely, just, I
Don't fall
recommend,
for it.
yeah, don't fall for it. Or whatever you say, realize that there's a good chance that that's going to get around.
Yeah. And if, and just don't send photos of yourself naked.
Ever.
Seriously.
Really, seriously, ever.
Because even if you're sending it to someone you actually know in real life and trust, there's always the possibility that someone could hack your account or their account or God knows what else. I mean, just be really
Yep.
careful. Not worth it. Um, Darlene says, you put something in perspective for me. She says, I live alone and I'm getting very, very lonely lately, but you're right. It's still better than living with a narcissist. And that's the truth, you know? And
Yep.
I think that for those of us who are still struggling in recovery and are struggling to get over someone, you know, imagine it's hard. It's hard because when you're in that painful part, it's hard to remember the bad stuff because you've got a little abuse amnesia or whatever. But truly being stuck inside the house with a narcissist at this point, as I'm sure some of you can attest, it's not, it's let's see, a nice way to say it is no picnic, but it's um hell. Just yeah.
It's, yeah, it's anxiety inducing.
Yeah,
You
at
know,
least.
living with somebody when you just right at the minimum of you don't know when the other shoe's going to drop, you don't know what kind of mood you're going to walk into, you don't know, it's just constant eggshells.
Yes.
And um, being lonely can be difficult, but at the same time, I think this is also a good time for us to ask ourselves a couple different questions. You know, asking yourself, what do you need at this time right
Mhm.
now? What do you need? Is it a sense of connection? Are you bored? Do you need some activity? Getting clear on what you need. That way, then you can start specifically addressing those needs. If it's a
Yes.
sense of connection, sometimes live streams like this can help. Setting up your own live stream with friends
Mhm.
can help.
Yeah.
Skype with people or FaceTime through Facebook.
Mhm.
Things like this can really help. Kind of just coming up with as creative a solution as you can to these issues. If you're bored, making a list of, okay, you know, let's say a month, 3 months, whatever from now, if you have time, like a lot of people do because they're stuck
Mhm.
at home, what would you like to have accomplished in this time?
Yeah.
You know, do you want to start watching all of the movies that have ever won Oscars, you know,
Yep.
or reading all the books that have ever won, um, you know, some sort of literary prize or
Or all the books you have on your shelf that you've been meaning to read, but you've
right.
been too busy to read.
Or just
That's
starting there, right? Yeah.
that's the story of my life.
Oh, girl,
Yeah.
me too. Me too. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. I did I was thinking too, something I've mentioned before, but never hurts to mention again,
Mm,
rearranging rooms in your house. Maybe, I don't know if you have any paint already in the house, you could paint, or you could do some sort of DIY project, or, um, what my point is project. Come up with a project, whether it's something you're doing like making your own blog, or you're, rearranging a room, or maybe, I don't know, learning to sew. There's so many free and low cost online classes you can take. Um,
mhm.
like Dana said, the reading of the books. So many different things you can do. Even like the DIY stuff, but something I'm hearing from several people which I think is super powerful, is a lot of people are saying, well, I'm going to use this time to try to, follow that dream I've always had of, maybe becoming a YouTuber, or becoming an author, or, something that they've always wanted to do, they've never had time to do. And now that, here you have this sort of forced vacation in your house. So it's like a perfect time to do
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, there's yeah. So,
Tell me.
oh, I was just gonna say there's so many videos out there for crafts and you know, if your
Yes.
kids are climbing up the wall, uh, videos. There's one of my favorite shows on YouTube. I absolutely adore this man. It's called The Craftsman. Crafsman, and it's
Mhm.
this guy, he just he's a it's a puppet, but he has the most relaxing voice ever, and it's, not I wouldn't say like adult humor, but it's wholesome, but
Yep.
he's just funny, he just has a great sense of humor, and he does little projects in his shop, and, um, it's just interesting, and it kinda sparks gets your creative juices going, and his voice is like I said, his voice is so soothing that it's ASMR,
Oh,
just
nice.
listening to him, yeah.
Nice. I like that. I like that. Let's see. Um, so I saw Metamorphosis said, oh, wait, first Rand Lyons said I moved away from my narcissist on February 1st, and I'm so grateful. Oh my goodness, for
Mm,
sure. Um, but then Metamorphosis said, I do feel very fortunate that I'm not with a narcissist during this time. It was bad enough how he treated me when I just had a cold, right? And then Nargis agrees because, said spoke words out of my mouth. It's exactly how I'm feeling, and I can't put it into words. Thanks for explaining. Like I'm in no control with what's happening, and I've been controlled all my life. Oh, that's powerful. Yeah,
yeah,
there's something to that. Yeah, and I do think I can see that, because see, I think I think people are missing the lack of structure a little bit,
yes,
and I could see how that would be especially true for someone who is still recovering. Yeah.
yes, that's you know, you touch on a really great point,
Mhm.
because that is a significant challenge, and I don't know about you, but I remember when I began working from home years ago with all of this, I really struggled with that. And I'm not real big into structure. or routine. I do things differently every single day. My life would be significantly better if I could get more of a routine.
Same.
Uh, but like, but I really struggled with it when I
Yeah,
began working at home, and the days blur together because all of a sudden it doesn't matter if it's Monday or Saturday. And
that's
so
right.
there's this whole sense of disorientation because y- time by how we mark time changes. And I know people that retire that really struggle with this as well. And I think for those of us that have been living this life for a while, we forget, like, oh my gosh, this is probably very disorienting for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um and that can create its own level of anxiety of you're doing too much or you're doing too little. Like there's no, it takes a little while to kind of find your balance with that.
Yep, it really does. Like I said, my kids are really, really struggling themselves, and especially my son. My daughter's kind of like a free spirit. My son's a free spirit too, but just in a different way. But
Mhm.
my daughter's kind of like it's cool, whatever. But they're both missing their friends. They're both missing the ability to hang out with them and all that. But really, that structure and it's incredibly, like you said. I mean, we're used to it. I've had to sort of develop my own structure a little bit, but even I feel like a little out of it because my
Mhm.
kids are home and they're
Yeah.
not usually. So no school, no, like you said, nothing to mark the days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Um, Metamorphosis says, I've had a relapse of PTSD and I think it's because I feel unsafe and not in control during the outbreak. It seemed like a weird trigger to me, but I get it. Yeah, I think that's happening more often than we'd like to think. And having a relapse means you must have learned um, the basics of getting through the hard moments. So go back and remember that stuff. Remember the pattern interrupts and remember the things that you did before to work through those episodes and it will help. Dana, any thoughts on that?
Yep. And the good news is I think sometimes, oftentimes, the symptoms that we're having can
Hmm.
help point us to what we need to do.
Yeah.
So if we're feeling, um, if we can identify, like I was saying earlier, if we can ask ourselves this question of what do I need right now? Is it a sense of safety? Is it security? Is it stability? Is it companionship? Is it um, activity to relieve boredom? Like what need am I needing to meet right now?
Good
And then
question.
reverse engineering that.
Hmm.
So if you can identify, especially for people that already struggle with PTSD and they're feeling very dysregulated, it can it it's just a different set of triggers these
Yeah.
days, but the core needs are still there. So if you kind of dig down, you're like, okay, this is actually, I'm needing to feel safety. I'm feeling very unsafe and very afraid. Then thinking about, okay, in what ways can I work towards meeting that need of getting safety in my life? Um,
Something else, just really quick, Dana. I didn't mean to
yeah.
interrupt that. I just thought of. I've talked about it. I think here too, but also in my channel, polyvagal theory. So
Mhm.
there's this nerve, the vagus nerve, that it's connected to the brain and the heart and the lungs and all the major organs. And it supposedly, when we go through traumatic events, it loses tone. Blah blah blah. The long story. There's long story short. If you do certain exercises, it can help to regain polyvagal tone that makes you feel safer. And I'm not going to go into the whole details here, but a couple of them are gargling water, singing, deep breathing, um, a few other things. And you can look over or research it or look at my channel, or Dana may have a video on it. I'm not sure. But it's something that is very powerful and useful in times like this because those are things you can do from your home with almost nothing. So something to
Mhm.
think about. Anyway, go ahead, Dana. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's great. And Nargis was saying security is what I'm so needing right now. I'm not feeling safe externally and internally too. I just feel unsafe inside my head.
Yeah. And again, I think that, remembering to keep, focus on things you're grateful for every day. Do the polyvagal things. Use pattern interrupts when you can. Like Dana said, take the time to sort of evaluate, why am I feeling unsafe and what can I do to make myself feel safer? And Nargis, based on our conversation that we had earlier via email, I think you're already doing some of that stuff, which is really good. And I think, going forward, stay focused on what you can control, not what you can't.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of this, for sure, it's easier said than done.
Mhm.
But during this time, it's just a crash course in all of this, in boundaries and self-care and kind of self-awareness and um, managing our emotions. And like I said, we're all struggling with it to some degree. So please don't feel alone in that. We're in uncharted waters, but we will get through this. We will get through this. We
Yes,
know what we need to do to get through this. That's half the battle right there. Now it's just
that's right.
doing it.
Yeah. And I think that, the more we do what they're recommending, the more quickly we stop the spread,
Hmm.
and we're maybe able to go back to regular life again. I mean, I can't believe that they're saying till the end of April. It's scary stuff, but what can you do? I mean, we just do it. We get through it, and we will.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Monica was saying, she says, I'm starting to get scared financially. Unemployment might take a couple of months for that first check. Uh, yes, very valid concern. If you guys have credit cards, I'm not a big fan of debt, but this, you know, um, urgent times require urgent solutions. And I think this is a time where if you can put things on a credit card, uh, to do so and to be making minimum payments.
Yeah.
So right now it's, the basics, food, clothing, shelter. I say shelter, but I really mean more utilities,
Hmm.
keeping utilities on right now. Evictions are all on pause. So prioritizing your money, just food and necessities right now.
Yeah. And
And
listen, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, call your landlord,
Yeah.
negotiate, and just say, this is, you've really got to put yourself first in this big
Yeah.
time. And they're going to have to figure it out. Here's the thing with banks and evictions and stuff like that. Banks are not in the business of owning real estate. They really don't want to own anybody's house because it's a financial nightmare for them.
Yep.
Uh,
That's right.
so they will work with you, and landlords will work with you because everybody's in this position.
Hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, go
Totally.
ahead, Ange.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just thinking of something that might be useful. Um, if you are in a position where you're struggling, you can't buy food or something like that, a couple things. If you have children in school, call your school district, because a lot of the districts, I know, I'm not saying all of them in the world. I'm saying a lot of them around where I live and possibly where you live are offering free food for families who need it. They'll deliver meals to your door from for the kids anyway, which is something.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not I'm not taking advantage of that because I don't need to, but I know that some families are, and it's really helping them get by. So when people are, and then there's also food pantries might be offering some sort of help this way, even with delivering boxes to your porch or whatever. Don't um, you know like go into Facebook and find your local groups and stuff and see what people are saying, because there are lots of people out there trying to help still, whether they're
Hmm.
helping from home or not. And so if don't let yourself or your children go hungry during this time. There are so many things you can do, uh, that where people will help you. People, uh, if anyone in my own life, were to go hungry, I would make sure that they weren't. And I'm sure that a lot of a lot of people in your local area will feel the same way. Um, so anyway,
Yeah.
but as far as the checks, I want to say one more thing. I read or heard that they're supposed to go out by the end of April or something. Those stimulus checks, so
Hmm.
maybe that'll help. Um, oops, sorry, and I don't really know. Anyway, go on, Dana. I thought there was a question from somebody that I wanted to read, but I'm trying to find it. I have to search. Hold on. Did I already read it? Ah, okay. Here we go. So Mike Wilson says, how do you handle being no contact now? And I blocked their number, but I still get a voicemail that says, you won't respond to me during this virus. You don't care. And I haven't responded. You're doing the right thing. I mean, if you don't have any children with that person, there's no reason that you need to be in touch with them at all during this time. So keep your eye on the prize of not
Hmm.
being with a toxic person and being happy and without them.
Right.
um, yeah. Any other
and
thoughts?
and see the guilt trip for what it is. So that's a big part of kind of unraveling, um, or kind of clearing the fog with
Mhm.
all of this is when we start to have a better understanding of boundaries and appropriate boundaries and what manipulation is, we're a lot less likely to get caught up in it. So the whole, oh, what, you don't even care, the world's ending, and like you don't even care about me. And God, I can't believe I ever wasted any time of my life with you, blah, blah, blah.
How many people do we know just like that? I'm laughing because I've heard those
Oh,
exact
yeah, yeah.
words. Yeah.
It's
Oh,
so manipulative, and, the reality is this dynamic is toxic,
mhm.
and it has nothing to in those kinds of things, they poke at a person, right? Those little guilt trips, because it makes you wanna pick up the phone and just unload and be like, "What? No, I do care, like, you're the reason we're not talking," and you just wanna
Mhm.
start, freaking out on them,
Yeah.
uh, because they keep needling you with
Yep.
stuff like this. So, anticipate that this is gonna be a thing, um, you know,
Mhm.
and every time you get one of these messages that's, guilt inducing, try to interpret it through the lens of, "Yes, absolutely, this person's toxic. There's more proof. There's more proof. There's more proof." You don't need to own that and
Right.
be like, "Oh my gosh, what kind of person am I? I won't, talk to my toxic ex, and the world's, everything's kind of coming to a head here." But part of healthy boundaries, and this is a part that's not often talked about. We normally talk about boundaries in terms of, um, saying no or
Mhm.
standing up for ourselves. But the other side of boundaries is it's boundaries are about what we let out into the world and what we take in.
Yep.
And that take what we take in, this is takes time and practice, but it's realizing, um, kind of what's appropriate. So we don't need to let everything that other people say affect us. We can
Right.
choose to be like, okay, that's toxic. That's a reflection of your behavior, not of, like, you don't have realistic expectations,
Right.
right? Like this person, what they're saying, I'm not going to absorb because it's not appropriate.
Right. Yep. Yep. And the other thing is too, um, just a technical tip for you. Call your phone company and ask them how to block at the phone company level. I know with I have Verizon, and you can go into the Verizon website, and for free you can use 90-day blocks. If you want to block longer, you have to pay, or but you can always go back at the end of 90 days and reblock them.
Mhm.
And I have a couple of people that are on my block list for various reasons, and I have to go into Verizon and do it, but then they can't even send you a voicemail. So whoever your carrier is, get in touch with them and find out, can I just block this person completely so I don't have to hear the voicemail? Something to think about. Yeah,
Yeah, I think the challenge is a lot of times they'll just start using different numbers.
that's another thing. Yep.
Uh,
And then, yep.
but like I said, I would just try to interpret this kind of ridiculous behavior as ridiculous behavior.
Yes,
And like, this is further proof that I don't need this in my life,
that's right. Yep.
and delete, drive on.
Yep. And it is a Hoover. It's a definite Hoover maneuver.
Mhm.
So be aware of that. And I think a lot of us need to watch for that right now. Those of us who have been out, you know, for less time maybe, or for even, I mean, I've seen people Hoover up to 20 years later. So
Mhm.
anything's possible. But yeah, I would suspect that probably a lot of survivors need to be thinking about, or aware of the possibility of a Hoover right now. And I would wonder how many have already experienced that
Mhm.
here. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, Nikki makes a very valid point. Hey, Nikki Lee. She says, make sure to watch your diet too. It's so easy to stress eat right now. I have no idea what you're talking about. I was just sorry, I'm just kidding, but she's so right. She's so right. Yeah, it's hard because what else are you gonna do? You know.
Yeah.
I know, because now suddenly I have time to bake monkey bread. I don't know what happened, but stuff is really good. Um,
Yep.
no, but it's really a valid point. We should all be careful. I did hear a positive tiny bit of information on the news. I heard that um, global pollution is down. Our
Mhm.
air pollution is down, which I guess is positive compared to Who knows? Maybe it'll give us a few more years on the planet.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. See, Blondie says, "You ladies have saved my life for real. Didn't realize that I was with a narcissist until watching both of your videos."
That
That's
means a lot to us. I
that
think
does.
yeah, that's why we do what we do. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Um,
Dear Universe says, "Okay, so I need help. My narcissist admitted he's a narcissist and doesn't know how to get help for it, but I feel it's a trap for me."
okay. So the narcissist admits they're a narcissist, doesn't know how to get help, but it's a trap. So are you still with the narcissist, or do we know? Um, I would say this. I would say if they've admitted to being a narcissist, they probably want something from you, and it probably is a trap for you. Just my thoughts. Help would be going to a psychiatrist or psychologist and opening up your core wound and what right their core wound and working through it and doing all the right things. I've never seen it be successful ever. Dana, you ever seen them?
Yeah, I mean, at a minimum, admitting that a person has a problem and actually doing the work required to resolve that problem are two very different things. And
Hmm.
generally, people with there's just so much there. It's sort of like if a person admits, "Oh, I admit that I'm an alcoholic."
Right.
Okay, cool. But if the relationship ended because you're like, "I can't live with this person's alcoholism anymore," well, they're still an alcoholic. Like they're, and they're still an active alcoholic, I should say.
Yeah.
Admitting that they're an active alcoholic, that's great. But now you've got all of the work to do to get sober and to stay sober. So I wouldn't even consider reopening a relationship that has any type of really destructive behavior. For They would need to get help and have some degree of results, consistent, stabilized results for 3 to 5 years before I would even consider it.
Yep.
And with people that are abusive, it it's not just one thing. Like with alcoholism, you're talking, and I say just one thing. I mean, anybody that's ever either struggled with alcohol or has known an alcoholic, that's definitely minimizing it, right? It's just because it's, even though it's don't drink, it's the one thing, it's still profoundly difficult to do. When you're dealing with a person who has profound dysfunction that's destructive or potentially deadly, if there have been threatening, violent, physical at all, that
Hmm.
stuff can escalate and often does escalate quickly. The risk is just too great.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's,
Definitely not worth the trouble. Yeah. And I agree. I agree with Dana. 3 to 5 years minimum would be, and most of them won't even put in any effort in for that long. So you probably be, you know, anyway.
yeah.
I,
And anybody can act the part, right? Like
that's
anybody can kind of, well, I say most people can pull it together
for a
and
short
act
time.
the, yeah, for a
Yeah.
short time and be on their best behavior. I think, my goodness, anybody that's ever tried to change their behavior can relate, right? Anybody who's ever tried to diet, right? Like you're like, okay, I'm going to eat healthy, this time's going to be different, and you might even really mean it in the moment,
Hmm.
but there's the reasons
Then you get
why.
hungry.
Then you right that right, like it's like the saying goes, I can resist everything but temptation.
Right.
um yeah, it's not easy. Change is not easy.
Yeah.
And it's when it's at the expense of other people, and they feel so entitled because there's so much work that needs to be done, and their boundaries are non-existent,
Yeah.
and they feel so entitled. And if as long as they have that mentality of um where there's real no locus of control on their end, where they're like, I did this because you did that, right?
Right.
If you forgot to buy milk at the store, that's why I put you down or yelled at you or hit you or spit on
So
you or
you
whatever.
deserve that
So you deserve
somehow.
that.
Right.
I got frustrated at something you did and then I punished you.
Right.
So it's your fault. That mentality takes a it's a sign of deep emotional immaturity, and it takes a long time for a person to fully see the extent of it and to really begin to even break it.
Yeah. And I really think that they really need to, I really believe you have to go in there and dig at the core wound and pull it out and dissect it. And you know what I'm saying? Like it's
Mhm.
not something that takes. It's not an overnight. It's not an overnight thing. And yeah,
And
and
there's just so many challenges there. I mean, again, most people, here's the challenge with therapy or even life coaching. If somebody's like, yeah, I'm here because I really think I have this issue, you're limited. You're only you're seeing them one-on-one for about an hour.
yeah,
And if you've got a person that has the skewed sense of appropriate behavior and boundaries, they will, by definition, start painting themselves as the victim
yes,
because they really feel, I yelled at you. You didn't pay this bill. I got upset and I shoved you and you fell against the wall and hit your head. And now I'm sitting in jail for it. This
and that's
is
all your
your
fault.
fault.
Yep,
I didn't mean for you to hit your head and to get a concussion. Um, that's on you. There's no accountability there. There's no work, there's no mature relationship possible with somebody who has such an immature understanding of appropriate behavior.
yep,
And so anyways, so if a person's in therapy, if that person's going into therapy and that therapist or life coach is not doesn't realize that, and a lot of them don't realize that they're going to be presenting their reality through their pathologically skewed lens.
yep,
And you get that a lot. And then the person comes home and says, oh, well, my therapist or my life coach says that you're the problem.
exactly. And then you're victim blamed, and then everything. Yeah, no, it's not good. Yeah, I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And also, I just wanted to add too, we all have blind spots to our personality. So let's just even say that a person's like, oh, I really feel like I'm a narcissist. They go into therapy and they're like, you know what? Yep, I am an absolute narcissist. I've done all of these. My selfishness has impacted these people in all these ways. Kind of, again, by definition, their degree of selfishness is at the expense of their ability to empathize and relate to other people. They're not going to be able to see their behavior clearly. And for sure, they're not going to be able to see the full impact of it. Really, none of us can.
right.
How we think we come across, because we are the only ones that know our own motivations for doing things. What we do and how it's perceived by other people are two very different things. So there's a lot of kind of built-in challenges when you're meeting with a person one-on-one, trying to figure out what's really going on here and how to address those problems.
Totally. Yeah. And on just on a slight, well, okay, a different note, but we have two people in the chat right now that are
Okay.
kind of on the same question. Meyer says, please help me out. My mother keeps calling me, even though I told her I'll call her when I feel better. What should I do? She's giving me panic attacks. And then Erock says, my mother left me a 3-minute message. Uh, that's because the voicemail caps at 3 minutes. I
Mhm.
couldn't listen to it. I just deleted it. Same thing with my flying monkey father. There's guilt issues. So look, this is what I think. First of all, don't feel guilty. You did the right thing by deleting the message. And to Meyer, block your mother if you need to. And I know that's harsh. And if you can't do that, set her ringtone to silent, and just let her leave the voicemails if you're not comfortable blocking, because this is a boundary you have to set with her, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but you need to set it if it's driving you crazy like this. Dana, thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's all about setting boundaries. I just wanted to acknowledge James.
Mhm.
Hi, James. I I saw your message. I will be getting back to you. Um, so just
Okay.
yeah. There was oh, this might be a little bit of a trigger for some people, but I think it's a good example as it's a common example and it shows the level of skewed, just pathological, warped thinking.
Mhm.
Darlene says, it sounds like my ex. He blamed my daughter for coming on to him when she was 6 years old and for him being in prison for sexually abusing and exploiting her.
Oh my God.
And that's very, very common for sex offenders because they have to be able to resolve that cognitive dissonance in their own mind with their behavior and um, to convince themselves that they're not doing a bad thing.
That makes me sick and angry
Yeah.
for all involved. I'm that really. that you're right on a logical, psychological level. You're right. With that being said, I mean,
Yeah.
I that's just this is an example of the outrageous lengths to which a narcissist will go to justify disgusting, despicable behavior. You know,
Yeah.
there is no 6-year-old on the planet who is actively trying to seduce someone, and if they are, they have no idea what they're doing. They're just being a child. I mean, I can't even. I need to stop.
Well, and that goes back to like the skewed, the non-existent boundaries, right? Because let's just say that was accurate, and you did have a young child who was hypersexual. Let's say they experienced a lot of sexual
That's
abuse as a child, right? And they
right.
were acting out. A person with appropriate boundaries would see, okay, this child, their
They
behavior is really concerning,
Yeah,
and even if they are acting out in a hypersexual way, it's not appropriate for me
exactly.
to
It's
be
a
sexual with a child, period, end of story.
right. See, to
That's
me,
the
yeah,
part they're missing.
right, right. To me, that would be a huge red flag of, oh my gosh, something happened to this kid. First, and if I see a child
Yeah,
ever in my life, if I've seen a child, and I've had clients, their children do weird stuff, and they mention to me, and I'm like, you need to get this child checked out
yeah,
because that is a red flag of, like you mentioned, previous sexual abuse. So if the child wasn't sexually abused before this person, with that, if the child hadn't been previously sexually abused, then the person's just full of BS. Those people of that nature, I'm trying not to say the word because I don't want Dana to have trouble with YouTube. Um, those people who are into gross stuff like disgustingness, they they justify things in their head in weird ways. Some of
mhm,
them will say, "Well, I didn't technically hurt them," and there's no justification. And they might find something sexual when it is in fact just a normal child thing, like wearing a bathing suit or doing gymnastics or something. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Something that is not sexual. So I can't even. There's just no excuse. I don't care if the child was hypersexual. That's not an excuse for this behavior, like
right.
you said. Yeah.
And Darlene had added, she said, yeah, she was just a little girl wanting a hug from daddy. And this is what's so sick is kids that do get in these kinds of situations where they can get confused and wonder, what did I do to contribute to this? And it's all of the manipulation that's involved with especially sexual abuse of children. And um, it's but I think, yes, it's absolutely beyond horrific, and it brings out rage in me like
Me too.
nothing else.
It's disgusting.
It's just it's infuriating, and it just makes, yeah, yeah, yeah. But
There's
I,
never an excuse though.
there's never an excuse, and I think it's important that we, because that kind of stuff can rope a person in, right? Because then you're starting to want to argue with them. Like, no, it wasn't sexual. No, she just wanted a hug. And then you're going back and forth. And then there has to come a point where we realize, I'm screaming into the wind here, because
Yes.
this person, I am not dealing with a person who shares an adult level of accountability and understanding of reality.
No.
Everything, they justify all of their behavior. They rewrite reality on the fly. You're not there. How we normal decent people go through life with working as a team and being solutions oriented and being able to compromise and negotiate and admit that we're wrong and all of this kind of stuff. The way that we normally go about relating to other people is out the door when it comes to a narcissist. When somebody with that kind of disruptive behavior, destructive and disruptive behavior, we have to use a different set of skills to interact with them, because trying to be solutions oriented, trying to get them to be accountable, trying to get them to see the error of their ways or what's appropriate boundaries, you're going to exhaust yourself. Because if somebody doesn't understand that by really about first or second grade, they're they're so far behind the ball. Like, there's no way that another person can really catch them up to speed, let alone a loved one. Um, that's wanting to make their relationship work, frankly.
Yeah. The damage, I mean, God, the damage these people do, lifelong
Yeah.
damage. It's I gotta stop. I need to move on. If you're good with that. It's just too much. It's if you know anyone who's gone through this type of thing as a child, as an adult, and you see, and in some cases you have parents who are like, let me get you in therapy, let me do all the right things, and that helps. But then in some cases you have parents who just, I mean, I've had clients tell me that the reason I'm so angry, so many reasons, but just recently I had a client who said her two different clients, as a matter of fact, who said that they disclosed their abuse to a parent who either didn't believe them or told them that's everybody has to go through that, when you're 6 years old or whatever. And it just makes me so freaking mad because these people, one of them in particular, is just destroyed, and I don't know that she'll ever be okay. And I just,
Yeah.
it's not right. It does infuriate me. It makes me so angry, for everyone,
Yeah.
for the child, and then who becomes the adult who never ever is able to be in a healthy relationship because has no concept of what that is. Like, normal is chaos and
Yeah.
abuse, and that's not okay. Let me just, for anyone who doubts themselves on this, it is not normal to be abused. It is not normal to live in chaos 24/7. And I know a lot of us, I I grew up the sort of the opposite of chaos on some levels because it was extreme control for me. But I was not sexually abused by anyone growing up that I recall. So, and I say that I recall because there was one incident that I'm not sure about, but it was not, that was not my problem. And I see so often that type of abuse becomes someone's life, and then they go one of two ways. They go super controlling and super, um like, and not necessarily controlling of other people, but controlling of their own environments and things like that, or they become hypersexual. They think that's the way to get
Mhm.
approval. I mean, there are so many. I'm going to stop. Okay, moving on. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mo Cowboy says anger in this subject is appropriate. I agree with that, but I don't want to.
And I also wanted to add too, a lot of domestic violence shelters have children's counseling,
That's right.
and a lot of times it's free.
That's right. Yeah,
So if sexual abuse falls under domestic violence, so
yes.
I would encourage you to call your local shelter and see if they do have those resources available. The good news with children is um, learning these basic skills about body autonomy, and this is, becoming our own safe space through boundaries. What we put out in the world, what we allow into the world, helping them process those feelings. I would also encourage uh, the gal who was saying, was saying that she had a lot of guilt because she married the guy and brought him into the home, working through that, and helping your child just develop a healthy sense of self, and all of that. She is very fortunate that she has a mother who cares as much as she does, and that you ended this relationship, and that you're doing all of the right things. And
Yeah.
I applaud you for that. I cannot even imagine how profoundly difficult this whole situation must be. So you are my hero for ending this relationship and for being concerned about your child, and wanting to do the right thing.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I'm seeing a lot in the comments here. Nikki's saying her parents were upset that she remembered this person was allowed to show up at a family reunion like nothing happened. Okay. Oh, I just want to go out and beat up a lot of people right now.
Yeah.
Darlene says, is it normal to fantasize about revenge that you would never actually do, such as castrating certain people without anesthetic? And I
Yeah.
typed in the chat what I thought about that. Yes. In fact, I actually think I, I actually think they should castrate people who are, I don't know how they would manage the women, but there are a few less of them, I guess, statistically. But yeah, they should do something to stop them. And I don't know, maybe I should shut up. Moving on.
Yeah, I personally think it just needs to be, you don't ever get out of jail. Like, you're put
Yeah,
somewhere else, because even with castration, um
there's still other things.
yeah, yeah, and that kind of even reduces the the understanding of sexual abuse down to just penetration, and it's so much more than that.
Valid point. Well, I think what I've heard, and I don't know how true it is, but what I've heard is if they don't have the the testosterone or whatever, that they don't get the urges, and that's probably not true because it's not just a sexual thing. It's also
Yeah.
a yeah, that's a
They
valid
might
point.
not have the urge to follow through on it. They might have difficulty with arousal, but it's a power and control thing.
And there are yes, and there are still things that they can do to hurt a child, and none, we just need
Yes.
to start
That's why I
looking at.
think, that person's so far gone at that point. When you, uh and a person's willing to, destroy, or not even destroy, but, when they're a predator that's attacking innocence,
Yeah,
right? To me, there's no coming back from that, and I don't care if they get rehabilitated or not. The risk to society is just not it's not
it's
worth
too
it.
much. I agree
Well,
with
it's
that.
too much, and
Yeah.
so,
I mean,
but
and I'm not, look, I want to make a point. I'm not, when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about the 17-year-old boy dating the 15-year-old girl or vice versa. I'm talking about adult to child, or even older child to younger child. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
15-year-old to 7-year-old or whatever, anything like they statistically they reoffend. I mean, they do.
yeah,
And I'm sure there are a few out there who didn't, but like Dana says, it's too much of a risk. I mean, ugh, they
but
ruin someone's life. Go on, Dana. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, um, but back to the part about, having really dark fantasies. Yes, that's a big part of healing from trauma, is allowing ourselves to get in tune with our anger,
Mhm.
and your anger is appropriate.
Yes.
And yeah, so having those fantasies, I would encourage you to take that energy from that anger and try to channel it, into something constructive.
Mhm.
So by all means, you can get on the treadmill and allow your mind to just go and have these fantasies,
Mhm.
right? Or, to take this energy and do something, a garden or clean, or, that way you're able to physically move that energy through your body. You're able to actually discharge it instead of having it just recirculate.
Yeah.
There has been, and that's not kind of just a woo woo thing I'm talking about here. There's been studies done about, all of the different chemicals that are involved with anger and aggression. You've got a lot of adrenaline, you have cortisol, these things, and they're finding that a lot of this gets trapped in the body, and that it can cause other issues. So there is this whole physical component to working through trauma, of there is validity in going for a walk or running it out or cleaning,
Mhm.
getting that energy out of your body.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Nikki says, "I hate the excuse it happened to them. That makes it okay." And they act like that, and I feel the same way. In fact, I think if it happened to them, they should know better. Because
Yeah.
they should know that their own damage. You know,
Well,
but
and I
again,
think that just speaks to a person's level of dysfunction, right?
absolutely,
It's
yes.
really wild when you, um you start seeing a person's mindset so clearly, where they're like, "Oh yeah, well, yeah, that child seduced that adult," or, "You shouldn't have remembered that, you're too young," or, "Well, gosh, that was a long time ago, you gotta forgive and forget." If we don't have This is why it's so important to have an appropriate adult understanding, a functional understanding of, accountability and responsibility and appropriate behavior, boundaries, all of that. Because without it, it's easy to this is how this cycle of dysfunction continues. So it's great that you are able to see this and to be like, What?" Like, "Yo? Really?" Like,
Right.
this is so outrageous that you would do this or think
Mhm.
this, and then at that point, and that's the unfortunate thing when there's abuse of any kind in a family, is it's oftentimes not people do start picking sides,
Yeah.
and to realize, "Okay, I can't just cut off the abuser, I'm gonna have to." It's sort of like cutting out cancer. You can't just cut out the cancer. It's oftentimes cutting out a lot of that surrounding tissue to make sure you've got it all.
Right.
And
Right.
it's the same thing in a family. but
Yeah,
you're doing the right thing because that's r- really deeply screwed up thinking. So,
to say the least.
yeah.
One last comment. Darlene says on the and this is I'd love to end on a I mean, I know we're close, but I'd love to end on a positive note. Darlene says on the upside, the daughter who was abused went to college and became a social worker. So I bet you that girl's out there helping a lot of other kids get out of those situations. So
Yep.
kudos. Thank goodness.
Yep.
Darlene, to me, that says you did your job right as her mother. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's that, that I really like that you're wanting to close on that because I think that is so powerful. And when a person is abused, it can feel like a life sentence.
Yeah.
And it can feel like, well, we're just going to be forever broken, that we're damaged goods. And we can absolutely decide. And this really does require a decision. We can't just kind of let the chips fall where they may and see how we feel at the end of all of this. We have to decide ahead of time, okay, I am going to use this for my highest and greatest good and the highest and greatest good of others. And that's the most effective life coaches, therapists, social workers that I've ever met are the ones that have gone through addiction,
Yes.
abuse, childhood sexual abuse, rape, you name it. They're the ones because they get it.
Yes. Exactly.
And they've gone through hell and they've come out
Yeah.
as a phoenix.
Yeah. That's
So
why we do what we do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is for sure.
Yeah. Got a little tear in my eye. We're good. Let's move on. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Good stuff. Yeah.
So
Um,
actually, and with all that said, um, with the coronavirus and everything, I think that's an important concept to think about. Okay, how are we going to handle this emotionally? Kind of back to the whole self-care thing, making that decision that you're going to use this experience for your highest and greatest good. What skills can you develop? What emotional skills can you develop? Right? How don't wait until this is over to then see what kind of emotional place you're in. Decide now. I'm going to use this for my highest and greatest good and for the highest and greatest good of others. And maybe that means investing more energy into your kids, having conversations, playing games with them, doing things. Because really, what else? What other option do we have?
right.
You know?
Right. 100%. Yeah. I
So
totally agree. Whew.
yes,
Okay. All right. Well, I think we are getting close to the
yes, we are
yes.
we are done for today. So I guess, Angie, thank you so much for being here. And as always, great conversation.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for being here and for supporting each other. And uh, please know that we try to do these every Tuesday. Next week we'll be over on Angie's channel, which is Angie Atkinson over on YouTube and across the internet pretty much. So 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We normally go for about an hour. Let us know too if there's topics that you guys would want to hear about or you want us to discuss or
Yeah.
anything. We're open.
Yeah. And we're always happy to talk about what y'all want to hear about because that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right on. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Okay.
Dana.
Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye.